She held my hand at dinner with my parents and said, "Your son's sweet, but I'm still exploring my options." My mother's face fell. My father stared at his plate. I let go of her hand, stood up, and said, "We should go." She had no idea what was coming. My name is Adam Mercer, and I work the night audit shift at the Riverside Grand Hotel, 11 at night until 7 in the morning, 4 nights a week. It's the kind of job that teaches you to read people, the late check-ins with nervous eyes, the business travelers who drink too much at the bar, the couples who arrive separately and leave together. You learn to notice things when the world thinks no one is watching. I should have been watching closer at home. Nina and I had been together for 2 years, met at a rooftop bar in the Riverfront district, one of those places where the drinks cost too much and everyone pretends they belong. She was selling luxury lofts to people with more money than taste. I was there with my brother Marcus, celebrating his promotion to head bartender at a restaurant I couldn't afford. Nina walked up to us, mistook me for someone important, and by the time she realized I wasn't, we were already laughing together. She said I was refreshing, different from the guys who tried too hard to impress her. I was calm, steady, real. She said she needed someone like me in her life. For 18 months, I believed her. The drift started about 6 months ago. Small things at first, easy to dismiss. Her phone buzzing at midnight with texts she'd angle away from me. Men at bars leaning too close while she laughed a little too loud. Her friends started having more girls' nights than seemed mathematically possible. When I asked what was going on, she called me jealous. When I stayed quiet, she called me mature. I couldn't win either way, so I stopped playing. The patterns got louder. She'd disappear into clubs with her friends, come back near sunrise smelling like smoke and secrets, and act offended that I even noticed. I started seeing her Instagram stories, videos from places I'd never been invited to, different men in the background, hands on her waist, her smile aimed at anyone except me. She always had an excuse. The guys were just friends. The touching was just dancing. The late nights were just networking for her real estate business. I wanted to believe her, so I did. That's what you do when you love someone. You build bridges over the gaps in their stories and pretend you don't notice the water rising underneath. I told myself I was being the calm boyfriend, the trusting one, the man who didn't interrogate his partner over every Instagram story and midnight text. I was actually being a fool. The dinner with my parents was supposed to be different. A reset, one normal evening where I could pretend we were still solid, still the couple who'd fallen in love on that rooftop 2 years ago. My mom had been asking to meet Nina properly for months. My dad, who'd been skeptical of every girlfriend since my high school disaster, had finally agreed to make an effort. Mom cooked her best meal, the lasagna she only makes for birthdays and holidays. Dad wore the button-down shirt he hates because he knows it looks nice. They set the table with the good plates, the ones that only come out when company matters. I brought Nina because I wanted to believe we deserved that table. The evening started fine. Nina was charming, which was her default setting. She complimented the food, asked my dad about his work, laughed at my mom's stories about my childhood. She held my hand under the table and squeezed it during the comfortable silences. I watched my parents warm to her. My mom's shoulders relaxed. My dad actually smiled. For about 45 minutes, I let myself think I'd been paranoid about everything. That the late nights and the distant looks and the phone angled away from me were just stress, just work, just nothing. Then the wine kicked in and Nina's mask slipped. We were talking about the future. My mom asked something innocent. Where did we see ourselves in 5 years? That kind of parent question. Nina laughed, squeezed my hand, and said words that will be carved into my memory until the day I die. Your son's sweet, but I'm still exploring my options. She said it like a cute confession, like she was being charmingly honest. Like I was a layaway plan she hadn't fully committed to, and admitting it was some kind of adorable quirk. The table went silent. My mother's face fell in slow motion. I watched her process what she'd heard, watched the hope drain out of her expression and get replaced by something protective and fierce. My father stared at his plate like he was trying to disappear into the lasagna. He'd never liked confrontation, but I could see his jaw tightening. Nina didn't notice. She was still smiling, still holding my hand, still performing the role of charming girlfriend while her words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, that would come later. Something colder, clearer. The moment when you stop making excuses for someone and start seeing them exactly as they are. I let go of her hand. The gesture was small, but Nina noticed. Her smile flickered. She looked at me with a question in her eyes, probably expecting me to laugh it off, to smooth over the moment the way I'd smoothed over 100 other moments in our relationship. I stood up instead. We should go, I said. My voice was calm, steady. The same tone I used with difficult guests at the hotel, polite but final. Nina started talking fast. The excuses came rapid fire, tumbling over each other in her rush to undo what she'd done. Adam, I was joking. Obviously I was joking. It was just the wine talking. You know how I get when I drink. Tell your parents it was just a joke. It wasn't a joke. It was. You're being ridiculous. You're embarrassing me in front of... I'm embarrassing you. I let that question hang in the air. You just told my parents you're still shopping for someone better, at their table, while holding my hand. Her face changed. The charm dropped away, replaced by something harder, calculating. Adam, sit down. You're making a scene. No, I'm making an exit. I reached for my wallet, but my dad stood up first. He put his hand on my shoulder, the first physical affection he'd shown me in months, and shook his head slightly. Don't worry about the bill. Go. My mom was looking at Nina with an expression I'd never seen before, like she was re-evaluating everything she'd observed tonight, finding the cracks in the performance, seeing what I'd been too close to see. I walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard Nina's heels clicking on the hardwood as she scrambled to follow. Adam, wait. We need to talk about this. You can't just... I stopped at the door and turned to face her. She was standing in my parents' dining room, her expensive dress catching the light, her makeup perfect, her expression shifting between anger and panic as she tried to figure out which approach would work on me. None of them would, not anymore. You're free to explain now, I said, because you're not explaining as my partner anymore. I opened the door and walked out into the night. Behind me, I heard her voice crack into something like panic, but I didn't turn around. The parking lot was quiet. My car was waiting. The night air was cold and clean and felt like the first honest thing I'd experienced in months. I drove for an hour before I realized I had nowhere specific to go. My apartment had Nina's things in it, my bed had her pillow, my bathroom had her toothbrush. Every space I'd thought was mine was contaminated with her presence. I ended up at Marcus's bar. He was working, but it was late on a Saturday and the crowd was thin. He took one look at my face and poured me a bourbon without asking. Then he poured himself one and sat down across from me at the end of the bar. What happened? I told him. Everything. Not just the dinner, though that was the headline, but the 6 months of drift I'd been pretending not to notice. The late nights. The phone turned away. The Instagram stories with other men's hands on her waist. Marcus listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. You know Julian Cross? He finally asked. The promoter? Onyx Club? Yeah. He's been coming into the restaurant lately. Always with different women, always connected, always climbing. Marcus paused. I've seen Nina with him. Twice at Onyx. Didn't want to say anything because I wasn't sure, but when? 2 weeks ago, and before that, maybe a month back. 2 sightings. Julian Cross. Onyx Club. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through Nina's Instagram. There it was, story after story tagged at Onyx. Her face in the crowd, the club's signature blue lighting, and in the background of one video, clearly visible for exactly 3 seconds, a man with Julian Cross's distinctive profile standing very close to my girlfriend. She's been going there every Thursday, Marcus said quietly. I hear things. People talk. People talk. But no one had talked to me. No one had thought to mention that my girlfriend had been seen at the same club, with the same promoter, week after week while I worked the night shift. I finished my bourbon, set down the glass, looked at my brother. Tell me everything you know about Julian Cross. Marcus did, and by the time he finished, I understood that Nina hadn't just been exploring her options. She'd been exploring them in my apartment while I was at work, with a man who had a key. I spent Sunday in a fog, moving through my apartment like a ghost haunting his own life. Nina's things were everywhere, her shoes by the door, her moisturizer in the bathroom, her half-drunk bottles of expensive wine in the refrigerator. Every object felt like evidence of a crime I was still processing. She'd called 17 times since the dinner, left 6 voicemails, sent 23 texts. The messages followed a predictable pattern. Apologetic, then defensive, then angry, then apologetic again. She blamed the wine. She blamed my overreaction. She blamed my parents for making her nervous. She blamed everyone except herself. I read them all, but responded to none. Instead, I did what I should have done months ago. I started paying attention. Nina's Instagram was public. She'd never seen a reason to hide her social life from strangers. I scrolled through 6 months of stories and posts, cataloging what I found. Onyx Club appeared 43 times. Different outfits, different friends, same location. In the backgrounds of videos, I spotted recurring figures, men who stood too close, hands that lingered too long, and in 11 separate posts, visible if you knew what to look for, Julian Cross. He was never tagged, never mentioned by name, but I recognized him from Marcus's description and from his own promotional photos on the Onyx Instagram. Tall, dark hair, expensive clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He had the smile of a man who knew he was being photographed and loved every second of it. I saved screenshots of everything, timestamps, locations, who was visible in frame. I built a timeline without knowing exactly what I was building toward. The act of documentation felt like control in a situation where I had none. By Sunday evening, my evidence folder had 47 images. Monday morning, I should have slept. My shift started at 11 that night, and the smart thing would have been to rest. Instead, I drove to my building and parked in the visitor section with a clear view of the resident entrance. I told myself I was being paranoid, that Marcus's sightings could be coincidence, that Nina's Instagram patterns might mean nothing, that I was a jealous ex-boyfriend inventing conspiracies because the truth, that she'd simply grown bored of me, was too ordinary to accept. Then Julian Cross's black Mercedes pulled into the resident garage at 11:15 in the morning. I watched it disappear through the security gate, the gate that required a resident code or a key fob, the gate that Nina could have shared with anyone she wanted. He was in my building, probably in my apartment, in my bed. I sat in my car for 2 hours, watched the entrance, counted the minutes. At 1:30, the Mercedes reappeared, paused at the exit gate, and turned left toward downtown. I caught a glimpse of Julian's profile through the driver's window, relaxed, satisfied, checking his phone at a red light. He looked like a man who'd just had a pleasant morning. I felt like a man whose entire reality had shifted beneath his feet. That night, I worked my shift in a daze. The Riverside Grand was quiet, just a handful of late check-ins and the usual paperwork. I processed reservations, balanced accounts, and smiled at guests while my mind ran calculations I couldn't stop. At 3 in the morning, I saw something that snapped everything into focus. Julian Cross walked into my hotel lobby with a woman who was not Nina. She was brunette, tall, wearing a cocktail dress that suggested they'd come from somewhere expensive. Julian had his arm around her waist, leaning close, whispering something that made her laugh. They approached the front desk, and I had to make a decision in half a second. Reveal that I knew who he was, or stay invisible and watch. I chose invisible. "Checking in for Cross," Julian said without looking at me. "Should be a suite on the top floor." I found his reservation, Suite 1208, one night, king bed. The credit card on file was his. The confirmation email had gone to his address. "Welcome to the Riverside Grand, Mr. Cross. Here are your keys." He took them without making eye contact. The woman giggled about something. They disappeared into the elevator, and I stood behind the desk, feeling like I'd just witnessed a car accident in slow motion. Julian Cross was cheating on my girlfriend. Or maybe Nina was the other woman. Or maybe there were multiple other women. The geometry of betrayal was getting complicated. I photographed his reservation on the computer screen. Timestamp, room number, name. Another piece of evidence for a case I was still building in my mind. By the time my shift ended at 7, I had a plan. Not a complete one, but a direction. I needed more information before I could decide what to do with it. I needed to talk to someone who knew Nina's secrets better than I did. Tessa Blake met me at a coffee shop near Nina's real estate office. We'd been introduced at a company party last year. She was Nina's coworker, supposedly her closest friend in the office. She had the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Adam, oh my God," she said as she slid into the booth across from me. "I heard about the dinner. I'm so sorry. Nina told me everything. She feels terrible." I noticed she didn't say Nina was wrong, just that she felt terrible. "Thanks for meeting me," I said. "I'm trying to understand what happened, what's been happening." Tessa's expression shifted into something that looked like sympathy but felt like performance. "Of course. Anything I can do to help. Nina's been going through a lot lately. The pressure at work, the stress of the market. I think she just cracked a little." The thing she said at dinner, about exploring options, was that just stress talking? Tessa hesitated. A tell. I'd spent years watching people check into hotels with lies on their lips. I knew hesitation when I saw it. "She's been confused," Tessa said carefully, "about what she wants, about her future." "Does her confusion have a name?" Another hesitation, longer this time. "Adam, I don't want to get in the middle of—" "You're already in the middle, Tessa. You've been covering for her for months, haven't you?" Her eyes widened slightly. Not surprise, more like the look of someone who'd been caught but didn't expect to be called on it directly. "I don't know what you—" "The girls' nights at Onyx, the Thursday meetups. The late nights that weren't actually with you. I kept my voice calm, almost friendly. Nina used you as an alibi. I'm not angry at you for that. I just want to know the truth. Tessa looked down at her coffee. When she looked up again, her expression had changed. Less performance, more calculation. 3 months, she said quietly. Maybe longer. She met him at the club and things just escalated. Julian Cross. Tessa nodded. He's been pursuing her hard. VIP treatment at Onyx, introductions to his investor friends, promises about business opportunities. Nina ate it up. She thought he was going to change her life. And you covered for her why? Because she asked me to. Because I thought she'd get it out of her system and come back to you. Because... She stopped, recalculated. Because I'm a good friend. The way she said it told me she wasn't sure herself. There was something else going on with Tessa, some angle I couldn't see yet. But the information she was giving me was valuable. How often did she see him? Every Thursday, for sure. Sometimes weekends. He'd pick her up from the office sometimes, take her to lunch. She was careful about it, but not that careful. People noticed. What people? Everyone. The office gossip mill has been running on Nina and Julian for weeks. Tessa leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially. He's connected, you know. Promoter for Onyx, but he's got bigger plans. Some kind of investor event coming up. A launch party for a new venue. Nina's been helping him with the real estate side. Helping him how? Introducing him to her clients. The wealthy ones looking for commercial properties. Julian wants to expand beyond clubs into restaurants, event spaces. Nina's got the connections he needs. The picture was getting clearer. Julian wasn't just sleeping with my girlfriend, he was using her. Her network, her clients, her access to money and influence. She thought she was having a romantic affair. He was running a business transaction. This launch party, I said. When is it? Saturday. Big deal. Everyone who matters in the riverfront nightlife scene will be there. Nina's going, obviously. She bought a new dress, $800. Tessa smirked slightly. Charged it to your joint account, probably. We didn't have a joint account, but Nina had convinced me to add her as an authorized user on one of my credit cards months ago. For emergencies, she'd said. $800 for a dress to wear to her lover's party. Using my credit. Thanks, Tessa. This helps. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Curiosity, maybe. Or anticipation. What are you going to do? I'm still figuring that out. Whatever you do, let me know how it goes. She gathered her purse, preparing to leave. Nina's not the only one who's been used by Julian Cross. He makes promises to everyone, delivers to almost no one. Someone should probably do something about that. She left me with that cryptic comment and the check. I sat in the booth for another 20 minutes, adding notes to my phone, updating my evidence folder, thinking about Saturday, Julian's launch party, his big night. The room would be full of investors, influencers, everyone he was trying to impress. Nina would be there, playing the role of his sophisticated companion, probably imagining a future that Julian had no intention of delivering. I could let it happen. Walk away, lick my wounds, move on with my life. That was the mature response, the reasonable response. But I'd spent 2 years being mature and reasonable while Nina smiled at me and lied to my face. Maturity had gotten me humiliated in front of my parents. Reason had gotten me a girlfriend who treated me like a backup plan. Maybe it was time to try something different. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Did some digging, Julian's launch party Saturday. I got hired to work the bar, service entrance access, full run of the venue. Want me to get you in? I typed back one word, yes. Then I added, and find out everything you can about the AV setup. Tuesday brought clarity and complications in equal measure. I woke up at noon after a restless sleep, my mind churning through timelines and evidence and possibilities. The apartment still felt contaminated. Nina's presence lingered in every corner like a stain I couldn't scrub clean. I needed to move, to act, to do something besides catalog my own humiliation. I started by checking my credit card statement online. The $800 dress was there, charged 3 days ago to a boutique in the fashion district. But it wasn't alone. Scrolling back through 3 months of transactions, I found a pattern I'd been too trusting to notice. Dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, drinks at bars I'd never visited, a spa day I'd never heard about. Nina had been funding her affair with my credit card while I worked night shifts to pay the bills. The total came to just over $3,000. I screenshot every transaction, added them to my evidence folder, and felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. She'd been stealing from me to finance her audition for Julian Cross's lifestyle. I canceled the card. By 2 o'clock, I was parked outside Nina's real estate office, watching from across the street. I told myself I was gathering information. Really, I think I just needed to see her, to confirm that the woman I'd loved for 2 years was actually capable of everything I now knew she'd done. She emerged at 2:15 for what looked like a lunch break. Professional dress, perfect makeup, confident stride. She checked her phone as she walked, smiled at something on the screen, typed a quick response. Probably Julian, probably making plans for their next meeting while I sat in my car like a ghost from her past life. Then something unexpected happened. A black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. Julian's car. I recognized the plates from the parking garage footage in my mind. The passenger door opened, and Nina got in without hesitation. The car pulled away, heading toward the waterfront. I followed. Keeping distance was harder in daylight. I stayed 3 or 4 cars back, letting other traffic serve as cover. Julian drove confidently, never checking his mirrors, never suspecting he was being watched. Why would he? He was the predator in this scenario. Predators don't expect to become prey. They stopped at a construction site on Harbor Street. A sign out front announced, "Future home of Onyx Collective's newest venue, opening soon." Julian and Nina got out, walked toward the building, met a man in a hard hat who was clearly the project manager. I parked across the street and watched through my windshield as Nina gestured at the building, pointed at various features, consulted something on her tablet. She was in full real estate mode. Professional, knowledgeable, helping Julian navigate whatever deal he was trying to close. This was why he kept her around. Not love, not passion, business. Nina was his real estate connection, his bridge to investors and commercial properties. She thought she was his girlfriend. She was actually his consultant, unpaid, unaware, and disposable once she'd served her purpose. I took photos of them standing together. The construction site, Julian's hand on her lower back. The intimacy mixed with commerce, more evidence, more ammunition. By evening, I was back at Marcus's bar, spreading printouts across a back table while he finished his prep work. He'd managed to get me copies of the venue floor plan for Saturday's launch party. Apparently, the catering company had shared it with bar staff for logistics purposes. "Main stage here," Marcus said, pointing. "That's where Julian gives his speech. Big screen behind him for promotional content, sound system, lighting, the works. Who controls the AV? There's a tech booth in the back corner, usually one person running the laptop that feeds everything to the screens. Can you get access to that booth?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Probably. Why?" I told him what I was thinking. Not the complete plan, that was still forming, but enough for him to understand the general direction. His expression shifted from skepticism to something like respect. "That's cold, brother." "She humiliated me in front of Mom and Dad. She's been lying to me for months. She's been spending my money on her affair." I shrugged. "I'm just returning the favor, in front of a larger audience." "What about Julian? He's connected. People in this scene, they talk. If you burn him publicly, he might come after you." "Julian's a promoter. His entire business is built on image and relationships. If his image gets destroyed and his relationships turn toxic, what's he going to come after me with? Bad Yelp reviews?" Marcus laughed despite himself. "Fair point." We spent the next hour mapping out logistics. Marcus would work the bar, keeping eyes on the room and feeding me updates via text. He'd arranged for me to enter through the service entrance with a hospitality industry credential. Technically legitimate, since I did work at a hotel. I'd position myself near the tech booth, wait for the right moment, and then... The then was still forming. I needed more evidence, more leverage, something that would make the impact undeniable. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "This is Tessa. We need to talk. There's something you should know about Julian. Meet me at Riverside Coffee at 8. I stared at the message for a long moment. Tessa had seemed helpful yesterday, but something about her bothered me. The way she'd offered information almost too easily, the gleam in her eye when she asked what I was going to do. She had her own agenda. I just couldn't see it yet. "Problems?" Marcus asked. Maybe opportunities." I pocketed my phone. "I've got another meeting tonight. I'll update you tomorrow." Tessa was already at the coffee shop when I arrived, seated in the same booth as before. She looked different tonight, less polished, more nervous. Her fingers tapped against her cup in an irregular rhythm. "Thanks for coming," she said as I sat down. "I've been thinking about our conversation. There are things I didn't tell you, things I probably should have." "I'm listening." She took a deep breath. "Julian and I have a history, not romantic, business. He promised me a management position at his new venue. Said I'd be perfect for it, that my real estate experience would translate, that he'd take care of me. Let me guess, the position went to someone else. It went to no one. It never existed. He just told me what I wanted to hear, so I'd keep helping him. Bitterness crept into her voice. I introduced him to 3 of my biggest clients, commercial property investors looking for nightlife opportunities. Julian used those introductions to secure funding for his expansion. I got nothing. So, you're not covering for Nina out of friendship? You're watching the same playbook get used on someone else. Tessa nodded slowly. Nina thinks she's special. She thinks Julian loves her, that they're building something together. She has no idea she's just the latest version of the same scam. What scam exactly? Tessa pulled out her phone, scrolled through her messages, and turned the screen toward me. I read the conversation thread. Text between Tessa and Julian spanning 3 months. His promises were explicit. Management role, equity stake, partnership. Her responses showed growing investment, growing trust. Then the messages stopped abruptly 6 weeks ago, right around the time he started pursuing Nina. He ghosted you. After I'd already connected him with investors worth $2 million in combined capital. Tessa's jaw tightened. He called Nina his real estate ATM in a text to one of his partners. I saw it when I was at his place picking up some documents. He didn't know I saw it, but I screenshot it anyway. She swiped to a new image. The text was clear. Nina's bringing the Harrington Group to the party. Real estate ATM keeps producing. We'll phase her out after the funding closes. Phase her out, like she was a subscription service he was planning to cancel. Why are you showing me this? Because I want to see him burn, and I think you're going to be the one holding the match. I studied her face, looking for the angle. With Tessa, there was always an angle. What do you want in return? Nothing that costs you anything. I just want to be there when it happens. I want to see his face when everything he built comes crashing down. She leaned forward. I have more. Emails between Julian and his investors. A spreadsheet where he literally ranks the women he's using by asset value. I can give you everything. Why didn't you just expose him yourself? Because I'm still in the industry. I still need to work with these people. If I'm the one who leaks this, I become the bitter ex-employee with a grudge. She smiled thinly. But if you do it, you're the wronged boyfriend. You have standing. You have sympathy. Nobody blames you for exposing the man who slept with your girlfriend. The logic was sound. Manipulative, but sound. Send me everything you have, I said. Tonight. Already uploaded to a shared folder. Check your email. I pulled out my phone. There it was. A link to a cloud drive containing dozens of files. Screenshots, emails, spreadsheets, calendar entries. A comprehensive documentation of Julian Cross's systematic exploitation of every woman who'd gotten close to him. One condition, Tessa added, when you do whatever you're planning to do, and I know you're planning something, make sure Nina sees exactly who she threw you away for. Make sure she understands she was never special to him, just useful. There was real venom in her voice. Whatever friendship had existed between Tessa and Nina had clearly curdled into something toxic. I'll think about it, I said. I spent the rest of the night reviewing Tessa's files. The spreadsheet was particularly damning. Julian had literally created a rating system for the women in his network. Categories included financial access, social connections, media value, and replacement difficulty. Nina was rated highly in the first 2 categories. In the notes column, Julian had written, boyfriend is night shift worker, minimal interference potential, easy access to apartment during work hours. Minimal interference potential. He'd factored me into his calculations. I was part of his risk assessment, a low-priority obstacle easily avoided. By 3 a.m, I had everything organized. Photos, timestamps, text messages, the spreadsheet, Julian's own words damning him in a dozen different ways. Saturday was 3 days away. Julian Cross was planning the biggest night of his professional life. I was planning to make it his last. Wednesday night, I decided to meet Julian face to face. Not for confrontation, not yet. I needed to see him up close, gauge his confidence, understand what I was dealing with. Marcus had told me Julian held court at Onyx every Wednesday, working the VIP section, schmoozing with clients and investors. The perfect opportunity to observe the predator in his natural habitat. I arrived at Onyx around midnight, dressed in clothes that didn't scream wronged boyfriend looking for trouble. Dark jeans, a decent jacket, the kind of anonymous outfit that lets you blend into a crowd. The line outside stretched around the block, but I'd anticipated that. Marcus had called in a favor with a bouncer he knew from his bartending network. A quick handshake, a knowing nod, and I was inside. The club was exactly what I expected. Loud music, blue lighting, bodies pressed together on the dance floor, bottle service tables elevated like altars to excess. The whole place reeked of manufactured exclusivity. Everything was designed to make you feel like you'd arrived somewhere important, even though the only thing you'd actually arrived at was an overpriced bar and a noise violation. I positioned myself near the back, ordered a drink I didn't plan to finish, and watched. Julian was easy to spot. He moved through the VIP section like a politician working a fundraiser. Handshakes, shoulder touches, that practiced laugh that said, "You're so interesting," without meaning a word of it. 2 women flanked him, neither of them Nina. They were young, pretty, and looked at him with the kind of admiration that comes from believing someone's promises. I wondered how long before they appeared on his spreadsheet. For an hour, I just observed. The way he leaned in when talking to women, the way he straightened up when talking to men who looked wealthy, the subtle hierarchy of his attention, who got the full charm offensive, who got the quick dismissal. He was performing constantly, adjusting his approach based on what each person could offer him. Then he saw me. I don't know what triggered the recognition. Maybe someone had shown him a photo of Nina's boyfriend. Maybe he'd done his own research after I became a variable in his calculations. But his eyes landed on me across the club, and something shifted in his expression. Not fear. Julian Cross didn't seem like a man who feared much of anything, more like curiosity, the way a cat looks at a mouse that wandered into its territory. He said something to the women beside him, patted one of them on the shoulder, and started walking toward me. I stayed where I was. Let him come. "You're Adam, right?" He extended his hand like we were meeting at a business conference. "Nina's boyfriend, or I guess ex-boyfriend now?" I didn't take his hand. Word travels fast. Julian lowered his arm smoothly, not missing a beat. Small scene. Everyone knows everyone's business. He gestured at the club around us. "First time at Onyx?" "First time I knew it existed." "Really? Nina never brought you?" He smiled, and there was something cruel in it. "She's been here plenty, though I guess you've figured that out by now." He was testing me, probing to see if I'd rage, threaten, make a scene he could use against me. I kept my voice level. "I figured out a lot of things recently." "I can imagine." Julian stepped closer, lowering his voice beneath the music. "Look, I'm not going to pretend nothing happened. Nina and I have been seeing each other. It wasn't planned. These things rarely are. But she made her choice, and I think you should respect that." "Her choice?" "She wasn't happy, Adam, with the relationship, with you. She told me she felt like she was settling for less than she deserved." He shrugged, all sympathy and condescension. "It's not personal. Some people just aren't meant to be together." The words were calculated to wound, and they did. But I'd prepared myself for this. I'd spent days staring at evidence of betrayal. A few well-aimed insults weren't going to break me. "That's an interesting perspective," I said. "Did you share it with the woman you checked into the Riverside Grand with on Monday night?" Julian's expression flickered. Just for a second, but I saw it. Surprised that I knew. Calculation about what else I might know. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Tall brunette, cocktail dress, suite 1208. I took a sip of my drink. "I work there, night audit. You walked right past me." The charm dropped away from Julian's face like a mask being removed. Underneath was something harder, more honest. "Are you following me?" "I'm observing patterns. There's a difference." "Is that a threat?" "It's information. What you do with it is your business." I set down my drink, preparing to leave. "Nina thinks she's special to you. She thinks you're building something together. But you and I both know she's just another name on a spreadsheet. What did you call her? A real estate ATM?" Julian's jaw tightened. He didn't ask how I knew that. He didn't try to deny it. He just stared at me with eyes that had gone cold. "You're out of your depth, Adam. You work the night shift at a hotel. You count receipts and hand out room keys. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Maybe not, but I know who you are. I know what you do to people. And I know that your launch party on Saturday is the most important night of your professional life." I leaned in slightly. "I wonder what would happen if everyone at that party knew what I know." Julian stepped forward, invading my space. His hand came up like he was going to grab my collar, but he stopped himself at the last second. We were in his club, surrounded by his people. He couldn't afford to make a scene. "Stay away from my event," he said quietly. "Stay away from Nina. Stay away from me." "Or what?" "Or you'll find out what happens when you mess with people who have resources you can't imagine." I held his gaze for a long moment. He was trying to intimidate me, and part of me was intimidated. Julian Cross had money, connections, lawyers. I had doorbell footage and a brother who worked at bars, but I also had evidence. And evidence, presented to the right audience at the right moment, was more powerful than all his connections combined. "I'll see you Saturday," I said. I turned and walked toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Julian say something to someone. Probably security, probably an order to keep eyes on me. I didn't look back. The point of this meeting wasn't to win. It was to rattle him, to let him know I existed as a variable he couldn't control. Mission accomplished. Outside the club, the night air was cold and clean. I walked to my car, checking over my shoulder every few steps, half expecting Julian's security to follow me. They didn't. Whatever Julian was planning to do about me, it wouldn't happen in a parking lot where witnesses might see. I drove to Marcus's apartment, where I'd been crashing since the dinner. He was still awake, watching something on his laptop with headphones on. He pulled them off when I walked in. How'd it go? He knows I'm coming for him. He doesn't know how. That's either brilliant or suicidal. Probably both. I sat down on his couch, letting the adrenaline drain out of my system. He threatened me. Said I didn't know who I was dealing with. Said he had resources I couldn't imagine. Do you believe him? About the resources? Probably. About me being scared enough to back off? I shook my head. He doesn't understand that he already took everything I cared about. What's he going to do, threaten my girlfriend? Marcus laughed darkly. Fair point. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder of evidence I'd been building. Photos, screenshots, documents, all of it organized by date and type. It was comprehensive. It was damning. It was everything Julian Cross feared being exposed. "The launch party," I said. "Walk me through the AV setup one more time." Marcus grabbed the venue floor plan from the kitchen counter and spread it out on the coffee table. Stage here, screen here, tech booth in the back corner, one guy running a laptop that feeds content to the main screen, and 2 side monitors. "What software?" "Standard presentation stuff. PowerPoint, probably. Maybe a media player for video content. Nothing sophisticated." "Can you get me 5 minutes alone with that laptop?" Marcus studied the floor plan. "Maybe. The tech guy usually takes breaks during the cocktail hour before the speeches start. If I can distract him, spill a drink on something, cause a minor crisis, you might get a window. That's all I need. 5 minutes to upload the files. Set them to play during Julian's speech." "What files exactly?" I showed him what I had. The photos of Julian with multiple women, timestamped to show overlapping relationships. The screenshots of his texts calling Nina a real estate ATM. The spreadsheet ranking women by asset value. The emails discussing how to phase out partners once they'd served their purpose. Marcus whistled low. "That's going to be a hell of a presentation." Julian wants to launch his new venue with a big speech about partnership and community and his vision for the future. I'm going to launch something different, a documentary about who he really is. And Nina? She'll be there too. This is going to humiliate her in front of everyone. I'd thought about that, more than I wanted to admit. Part of me still remembered the woman I'd fallen in love with. Her laugh, her energy, the way she used to look at me like I was exactly what she needed. But that woman had also looked my mother in the eye and announced she was still exploring her options. She'd used my credit card to buy dresses for dates with another man. She'd let Julian into my apartment, my bed, my life, while I worked night shifts to pay our bills. Whatever sympathy I had left for her had been used up. "She made her choices," I said. "Now she gets to live with the consequences." Marcus nodded slowly. "All right then, Saturday night. Let's make Julian Cross famous for all the wrong reasons." I stayed up until dawn, refining the presentation. Every slide was calculated for maximum impact. Every image was time-stamped and contextualized. Every piece of evidence led inexorably to the same conclusion. Julian Cross was a fraud who exploited women for business gain and discarded them when they stopped being useful. By the time I finally fell asleep, the sun was coming up and my laptop screen showed a presentation titled "The Real Julian Cross." 47 slides, 3 video clips, 1 devastating truth. Saturday was 3 days away. Thursday morning brought doubt. I woke up at noon with my laptop still open beside me, the presentation glowing on the screen like evidence of a crime I hadn't yet committed. In the harsh light of day, the plan seemed less like justice and more like revenge. And maybe those weren't the same thing. I made coffee, stood by Marcus's window, and watched the city move through its afternoon routines. Normal people doing normal things. Going to work, meeting friends, living lives that didn't involve elaborate schemes to destroy nightclub promoters at launch parties. What was I actually doing? The question nagged at me as I showered, dressed, tried to eat something. I'd spent the last 5 days building a case, gathering evidence, planning a public humiliation. But to what end? Julian would be embarrassed. Nina would be exposed. And then what? Would I feel better? Would any of this undo the 2 years I'd wasted on a relationship that had been dying for months? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through Nina's messages again. She'd stopped texting after Tuesday, probably because Julian had warned her to cut contact, or because she'd finally accepted that I wasn't responding. The last message read, "I know you're hurt, and I'm sorry. Can we please just talk? I never meant for any of this to happen." Never meant for it to happen. Like the affair was a natural disaster that had swept through our relationship without anyone's consent. Like she'd been a passive victim of forces beyond her control. I almost called her. My thumb hovered over her name for a long moment. What would I even say? Would I demand explanations? Offer forgiveness? Ask why she'd thrown away everything we'd built for a man who literally ranked women on spreadsheets? In the end, I put the phone down. There was nothing left to say. The time for conversations had passed when she held my hand at my parents' table and announced she was still shopping for someone better. I needed air. I drove to the riverfront, parked near the construction site where Julian's new venue was being built, and walked along the water. The afternoon was cold and gray, the kind of weather that matched my mood. A few joggers passed me, headphones in, focused on their own worlds. I felt invisible, which was exactly what I wanted. Then I saw them. Nina's silver Audi was parked in the construction site lot. Through the chain-link fence, I could see her standing near the building entrance with Julian. They were looking at something on a tablet, probably architectural plans or design concepts, professional body language, but close enough that their shoulders almost touched. I watched for a few minutes, hidden by a concrete pillar. Julian pointed at something on the tablet. Nina nodded, made a note on her phone. They looked like business partners, which I supposed they were. The fact that they were also sleeping together was just a fringe benefit. Then Julian leaned in and kissed her. It was quick, just a peck, the kind of casual intimacy that comes from regular contact, but it sent a jolt through my chest. Not jealousy exactly, something colder. Confirmation. This was who she'd chosen. This was what she'd traded me for. I took a photo from my position behind the pillar, added it to my evidence folder. Then I walked back to my car and drove away before anyone spotted me. By evening, I was at Marcus's bar, nursing a bourbon I didn't really want. He was working, but the Thursday crowd was thin enough that we could talk between customers. Having second thoughts? He asked, reading my expression. Maybe. I don't know. I stared at my drink. Part of me wants to just walk away. Move on. Let Julian and Nina implode on their own, which they probably will eventually. And the other part? The other part wants them to know that I know. Wants everyone to know. Wants Julian to experience what he does to people, the way he uses them and discards them when they're not useful anymore. Marcus wiped down the bar, considering. Remember when we were kids and Danny Marcos stole your bike? I blinked at the non sequitur. That was 20 years ago. Dad told you to let it go. Be the bigger person. Don't start trouble. So you did. You let it go. He set down the towel. And Danny Marcos kept stealing things from other kids for the next 3 years because nobody ever made him face consequences. This isn't about a stolen bike. No, it's about a stolen 2 years of your life, and a man who's going to keep doing this to other women unless someone stops him. Marcus leaned forward. You're not planning this just for revenge, Adam. You're planning it because guys like Julian Cross don't stop until someone makes them stop, and you're the one with the evidence to do it. I thought about Tessa's files, the spreadsheet ranking women by asset value, the text discussing how to phase out partners, the pattern of exploitation stretching back years. Julian had done this before Nina. He would do it again after Nina, unless someone changed the equation. There's something else, Marcus said. He pulled out his phone, showed me a text conversation. I've been doing some digging, talking to people who know Julian. Turns out he's been telling investors that Nina is more than just his real estate connection. He's been implying she's going to be his business partner, co-owner of the new venue. That's a lie. Of course it is, but it's a lie that makes investors feel more confident. Nina's got credentials, reputation. Her involvement makes the whole project seem more legitimate. Marcus pocketed his phone. When you expose him on Saturday, you're not just embarrassing him. You're showing his investors that everything he told them was built on deception. The investors will pull their funding. Probably, which means Julian's expansion dies. His reputation in the industry dies. His whole carefully constructed house of cards comes crashing down. I sat with that for a moment. The scope of what I was planning had just gotten larger. This wasn't just about personal revenge anymore. It was about dismantling an entire operation built on exploitation and lies. What about Nina? I asked. If Julian's been using her name to secure investments, and then it comes out that she was just his mistress, her reputation takes a hit too, probably a big one. Marcus shrugged. That's the cost of playing games with people who don't play fair. I nodded slowly. Nina had made her choices. She'd chosen Julian over me. She'd chosen deception over honesty. She'd chosen to be part of his operation, even if she didn't fully understand what that operation was. Now she would share in the consequences. My phone buzzed. A text from Tessa. You ready for Saturday? I typed back. Almost. Need one more thing. Name it. I need to know everyone who's going to be at the party. Investors, business contacts, press. Everyone Julian is trying to impress. I can get you the guest list. Give me an hour. True to her word, Tessa sent the list within 45 minutes. I scrolled through the names, recognizing a few from local business news. Commercial real estate developers, nightlife industry veterans, a few social media influencers with large followings, and at the bottom of the list, a name that made me sit up straight, Richard Harrington, the Richard Harrington, founder of Harrington Commercial Properties, one of the largest real estate investment firms on the East Coast. Nina had been trying to land a meeting with him for months. He was her white whale, the client who would transform her career if she could bring him on board. And according to Tessa's list, he was coming to Julian's launch party, specifically because Julian had promised him that Nina would be there to discuss a potential partnership. Julian wasn't just using Nina. He was using her reputation to bait the biggest fish in the industry. I called Marcus. I need to upgrade the plan, I said. Richard Harrington is going to be at the party. The real estate guy? Why does that matter? Because Julian used Nina's name to get him there. If Harrington sees the evidence, sees that Nina was being manipulated, that Julian was lying about their partnership, he's going to be furious. Not just at Julian, at the whole situation. Which means the fallout gets even bigger. Exactly. But it also means we need to be more careful. If this looks like a bitter ex-boyfriend throwing a tantrum, Harrington will dismiss it. It needs to look like a legitimate exposure of fraud. Marcus was quiet for a moment. How do we do that? We let the evidence speak for itself. No speeches, no accusations, just the documents, the photos, the texts, all of it displayed without commentary. Let the audience draw their own conclusions. And if Julian tries to spin it? Say you fabricated everything? That's why timing matters. The evidence plays during his speech, when he's already made claims about partnership and integrity, and building something real. By the time he sees what's on the screen, he's already contradicted himself. His own words become the rope that hangs him. I spent the rest of the night refining the presentation one more time. Every slide was stripped of editorializing, just facts, dates, screenshots. The truth, presented cleanly, letting Julian's own words and actions tell the story. By Friday morning, I was ready. One more day until the launch party. One more day until Julian Cross discovered that the night shift worker he dismissed as minimal interference potential was about to become the biggest problem of his professional life. I slept better that night than I had all week. Friday night, I followed Julian again. Not to confront him, not to gather more evidence. I just needed to see him one more time before Saturday to remind myself why I was doing this, to make sure the cold anger in my chest was still burning. I parked outside Onyx around 10, watched the Friday crowd line up for entry, watched Julian's Mercedes pull into the reserved spot near the VIP entrance. He emerged looking confident, energized, ready for another night of working the room. A woman was with him, not Nina, someone new, and he had his hand on the small of her back as they walked inside. Another woman, another target. The spreadsheet in my evidence folder probably needed updating. I sat in my car for an hour, watching people come and go, imagining what tomorrow would look like. The venue packed with investors and influencers. Julian on stage, giving the speech of his life. And then, the screens changing, the truth appearing, the carefully constructed facade crumbling in real time. Part of me still wondered if I was making a mistake. Then my phone buzzed, a text from Nina. I know you've been watching. Julian told me about your conversation at the club. Whatever you're planning, please don't. You'll only make things worse for yourself. I stared at the message for a long moment. She wasn't warning me out of concern for my well-being. She was warning me because Julian had told her to, because they were both worried about what I might do. Good, they should be worried. I typed back a response. Enjoy the party tomorrow. Then I turned off my phone and drove away. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of gray, heavy weather that felt appropriate for what I was about to do. I woke up early, reviewed the presentation one final time, and ran through the logistics with Marcus over coffee. Tech booth is in the back corner, he said, pointing at the floor plan spread across his kitchen table. Guy running the AV is named Derek. Young, easily distracted. I'll spill a drink near his station around 9:15, right before Julian's speech is scheduled to start. That should give you a window to access the laptop. How long? 3 minutes, maybe 4, long enough to plug in the USB and set the files to play. What if Derek comes back early? Then you're a guest who wandered into the wrong area looking for the bathroom. Play dumb, apologize, leave. Marcus shrugged. Worst case, you get escorted out. Best case, the presentation plays and Julian's world burns down. I nodded, trying to calm the nervous energy building in my chest. This was really happening. After a week of planning, gathering evidence, questioning my own motives, I was actually going to do this. Yeah, one more thing, Marcus said. I did some asking around. Julian's got security at these events. 2 guys, professional. They're mostly there to handle drunk guests, but if things go sideways, they might come for you. How do I avoid that? Stay near the exits. Once the presentation starts playing, don't stick around to watch. Get out before anyone figures out who uploaded the files. Sound advice. This wasn't about being a hero. It was about delivering the truth and letting it do its work. I spent the afternoon preparing, showered, dressed in something respectable but forgettable, charged my phone, made sure the USB drive with the presentation files was in my jacket pocket. By 6 o'clock, I was as ready as I'd ever be. Marcus left first, heading to the venue for his bartending shift. I'd follow in an hour, entering through the service entrance with the hospitality credential he'd arranged. We'd communicated only by text from this point forward, nothing that could be overheard or intercepted. At 7:30, I drove to the venue. The new Onyx location was impressive, I had to admit. A converted warehouse on the waterfront, all exposed brick and industrial lighting with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. The kind of place that photographed well and made people feel like they were part of something exclusive. The parking lot was already filling up. Expensive cars, well-dressed guests, the buzz of anticipation that comes with a launch party. I parked in the back near the service entrance and texted Marcus. I'm here. His response came 30 seconds later. Service door is propped open. Staff bathroom on the left. I'll signal when Derek steps away. I walked through the service entrance like I belonged there, nodding at a catering staffer who barely glanced at me. The backstage area was chaotic. Trays of hors d'oeuvres, cases of wine, servers adjusting their uniforms. Nobody questioned my presence. I found the staff bathroom and waited. The next hour was the longest of my life. I could hear the party through the walls, music, laughter, the hum of networked conversation. Julian was probably out there right now, working the room, shaking hands with investors, positioning himself for the speech that would define his career. At 9:10, my phone buzzed. Derek is heading to the bar. Go now. I moved. The tech booth was exactly where Marcus had described. A small alcove in the back corner, partially hidden by a curtain. Inside, a laptop sat connected to cables that fed the main screen and 2 side monitors. The screensaver showed the Onyx logo rotating slowly. I had 3 minutes, maybe less. My hands were steady as I inserted the USB drive. The laptop recognized it immediately. I navigated to the presentation file, set it to play automatically in 8 minutes, timed to coincide with the middle of Julian's speech, and minimized the window so nothing would look suspicious when Derek returned. 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Clean. I pocketed the USB drive and stepped out of the booth just as Derek came around the corner with a fresh drink in his hand. He glanced at me without much interest. You lost? Looking for the bathroom? Someone said it was back here. Staff bathrooms that way. He pointed toward the service area. Guest bathrooms are on the other side of the main room. Thanks. I nodded and walked away, heart pounding but face calm. 8 minutes until the presentation played. 8 minutes until Julian's carefully constructed world started falling apart. I positioned myself near one of the side exits, where I could see the main stage but reach the door in seconds if needed. The room was packed. Easily 200 people, maybe more. I spotted Richard Harrington near the front, talking to a woman I didn't recognize. Julian was on stage, microphone in hand, beginning his speech. Thank you all for being here tonight, he said, his voice smooth and confident. This venue represents everything I believe in. Community, partnership, building something real together. The irony was almost too perfect. Building something real, from a man who had never built anything real in his life. I scanned the crowd and found Nina. She was standing near the stage, dressed in what I assumed was the $800 dress, watching Julian with an expression of pride and anticipation. She had no idea what was coming. None of them did. 6 minutes. Julian continued his speech, talking about his vision for the nightlife industry, his commitment to creating spaces where people could connect authentically. He thanked his investors by name, made a point of acknowledging Richard Harrington's presence, dropped hints about future expansion plans. "And I want to give special recognition to someone who's been instrumental in making this dream a reality," Julian said, gesturing toward Nina. "My partner in every sense of the word, Nina Ashford." Nina beamed. The crowd applauded. I felt sick. 4 minutes. Julian launched into the next part of his speech, something about the importance of trust in business relationships. The words washed over me without registering. All I could focus on was the countdown in my head. 3 minutes. I saw Marcus across the room, behind the bar, watching me. He gave a small nod. Everything was in place. 2 minutes. Julian was wrapping up, building toward his big finish. "So I ask you all to raise your glasses," he said, lifting his champagne. "To partnerships, to trust, to building something real." 1 minute. The crowd raised their glasses. Julian smiled his confident smile. Nina looked at him like he was everything she'd ever wanted. Then the screen behind Julian changed. The Onyx logo disappeared. In its place, a photograph appeared. Julian and the brunette from the Riverside Grand walking into the hotel lobby. Timestamp clearly visible. My evidence folder, slide 1. Julian didn't notice at first. He was still facing the crowd, still basking in the applause. But I watched confusion spread through the audience like a ripple. Heads turning, whispers starting. Someone near the front pointed at the screen. Julian finally turned around. The second slide appeared. A screenshot of Julian's text calling Nina his real estate ATM. The words were massive, projected 10 feet tall. "What the hell?" Julian grabbed for his microphone, but his voice was drowned out by the murmurs spreading through the crowd. Slide 3, the spreadsheet ranking women by asset value. Nina's name highlighted. Financial access, high. Replacement difficulty, low. I watched Nina's face go pale. She was staring at the screen, reading her own entry on Julian's spreadsheet, processing the reality that she wasn't his partner, she was his product. Slide 4. Julian's emails discussing how to phase out partners once they'd served their purpose. A specific mention of a previous woman he'd used and discarded. Julian was shouting now, calling for someone to cut the presentation. Derek was running toward the tech booth, but the files were playing from a scheduled queue. Stopping them would take longer than just letting them finish. Slide after slide appeared. Photos of Julian with different women, texts revealing his true opinions of the people he'd charmed, evidence of promises made and broken. A comprehensive portrait of a man who had built his entire career on manipulation and lies. I didn't stay to watch the rest. I moved toward the exit, slipping through the confused crowd while all eyes stayed fixed on the screen. Behind me, I heard Julian yelling, heard the crowd's murmurs turn to angry questions, heard what sounded like Richard Harrington demanding an explanation. I was outside in the cold night air, walking toward my car when I heard footsteps behind me. Running footsteps. I turned just as Julian burst through the exit door, face twisted with rage. He spotted me immediately and charged. "You," he snarled. "You did this." He was faster than I expected. Before I could react, he grabbed my jacket, shoved me backward. I stumbled against a parked car, caught myself on the hood. "I'm going to destroy you," Julian said, getting in my face. "You have no idea what you've done. I have lawyers, connections. I'll make your life a living." I shoved him back, hard. He stumbled, caught off balance by the force of it. For a second, he looked genuinely surprised, like he couldn't believe the night shift worker had actually pushed back. "Your lawyers can't undo the truth," I said. "Everyone in that room saw who you really are. Your investors, your contacts. Richard Harrington." I straightened my jacket. "Nina." Julian's face contorted. He lunged at me again, but this time I was ready. I sidestepped, let his momentum carry him past me. He crashed into the side of his own Mercedes, stumbled, fell against the door. Security appeared at the exit, drawn by the commotion. 2 large men in dark suits, looking for the source of the problem. "He attacked me," I said calmly, pointing at Julian. "Unprovoked, in front of witnesses." Julian scrambled to his feet, but the security guards were already moving toward him. One of them put a restraining hand on his shoulder. "Sir, you need to calm down." "Get off me. Do you know who I am?" "Yes, sir. You're the guy whose party just went sideways. And right now, you're the guy who needs to step back before this gets worse." I watched Julian struggle against the security guards, his carefully constructed composure shattered into something ugly and desperate. The man who had charmed investors, seduced women, and built an empire on false promises was now being restrained in his own parking lot like a common drunk. It should have felt satisfying. Instead, I felt hollow. "This isn't over," Julian spat at me over the security guard's shoulder. You hear me? This isn't even close to over." "You're right," I said quietly. "It isn't. But the ending isn't going to be the one you planned?" I turned and walked toward my car, leaving Julian to deal with the mess I'd created. Behind me, I could hear more people spilling out of the venue, voices raised in confusion, anger, disbelief. The launch party had become a crime scene, and everyone was trying to figure out who to blame. My phone buzzed. "Marcus. Where are you?" "Parking lot. Had a run-in with Julian. Security has him." "Get out of there. People are asking questions. Someone mentioned seeing a guy near the tech booth before the presentation switched." I quickened my pace, reaching my car just as the venue doors burst open again. This time it was Nina who emerged, her expensive dress catching the parking lot lights, her face streaked with tears and ruined makeup. She saw me immediately. For a long moment, we just stared at each other across the parking lot. 2 years of memories hung in the air between us, the laughter and the lies, the love and the betrayal, everything we'd built and everything she'd destroyed. Then she started walking toward me. "Adam." Her voice cracked on my name. "Adam, please, we need to talk." I should have gotten in my car and driven away. That was the smart move, the clean exit. But something kept me rooted in place. Maybe curiosity, maybe the need for closure, maybe just the desire to see her face when she finally acknowledged what she'd done. "Talk," I said flatly. "You want to talk now?" "I didn't know." She stopped a few feet away, arms wrapped around herself like she was cold. "About the spreadsheet, the texts, the way he talked about me. I swear to God, Adam, I didn't know." "Would it have mattered if you did?" She flinched like I'd slapped her. "That's not fair." "Fair?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to talk about fair? You slept with him in our apartment while I was working night shifts to pay our bills. You used my credit card to buy that dress you're wearing right now. And you sat at my parents' table, held my hand, and told them you were still exploring your options." I shook my head. "Don't talk to me about fair." Nina's face crumpled. "I made mistakes. I know that. But Julian, he manipulated me. He made me think we were building something real, that I was special to him." "You were special to him? You were his real estate ATM, his connection to investors like Richard Harrington, his ticket to legitimacy." I gestured toward the venue where chaos was still unfolding. "Everything you thought you had with him was a transaction. You just didn't read the fine print. I loved him." The words came out as a whisper, broken and pathetic. "No. You loved what he represented. The excitement, the status, the feeling of being wanted by someone who seemed important." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "I wasn't exciting enough for you. I wasn't ambitious enough. I was just the safe option you kept around while you shopped for something better." That's exactly what you said. At my parents' table, in front of my mother." I let the words hang in the air. "You told them who you really were, Nina. I just made sure everyone else heard it too." She stared at me with red-rimmed eyes, and I saw something shift in her expression. The desperation faded, replaced by something harder. Anger, maybe, or the realization that I wasn't going to forgive her. "You planned this," she said slowly. "All of it. The evidence, the timing, the presentation. You've been planning this for days. A week, actually, since the dinner. Why? To humiliate me? To destroy Julian? What did you actually accomplish tonight except making everyone miserable?" "I accomplished the truth, something you and Julian were apparently allergic to." I pulled my car keys from my pocket. "Everyone in that room now knows who he really is, including Richard Harrington, whose investment Julian was counting on, including the other investors whose money was going to fund his expansion, including you." Nina's jaw tightened. "Harrington pulled his commitment. I heard him tell Julian's business partner before I came outside. The whole deal is falling apart." "Good. Good? Do you have any idea what this does to me? My reputation? I was standing on that stage when Julian called me his partner. Now everyone thinks I was part of whatever scam he was running." "Were you?" "No." She stepped forward, jabbing a finger at my chest. "I was his girlfriend, Adam. I thought I was his girlfriend. I didn't know about the other women, the spreadsheets, any of it. But you knew you were cheating on me. You knew you were lying to me every day for months. You knew you were using my money to fund your affair." I caught her wrist, lowered it gently but firmly. "Everything that happened to you tonight is a consequence of choices you made. Own them." She yanked her hand back, eyes blazing. "You're enjoying this. Watching me suffer. Watching Julian suffer. This was never about justice. It was about revenge. Maybe it was both. You're no better than him, Adam. You think you're the victim here, but you just destroyed 2 people's lives in front of 200 witnesses. How is that different from what Julian did? The question landed harder than I expected. I'd asked myself the same thing a dozen times over the past week. The difference, I'd told myself, was that Julian exploited people for profit. I was just exposing the truth. But was that really the line? Did my motives make the damage I'd caused any less real? Before I could answer, another figure emerged from the venue. Tessa Blake, moving quickly toward us, her expression a mixture of triumph and calculation. "Adam," she called out, "you need to leave. Now. Julian's people are looking for whoever uploaded those files. Security is reviewing the footage." "Let them review it. I was looking for the bathroom." "They have you on camera entering the tech booth." Tessa stopped beside Nina, barely glancing at her. "Derek identified you, said you were poking around his laptop." Nina stared at me. "You were in the tech booth?" "For about 3 minutes, long enough to ruin Julian's life." I looked at Tessa. "Why are you helping me?" "Because Julian had this coming, and I wanted to watch it happen. But now it's happened, and you need to disappear before this turns into something more complicated." She pulled out her phone, showed me a text message. "Julian's already talking about pressing charges. Unauthorized access to computer systems, defamation, whatever his lawyers can make stick." I considered that. Julian had resources I didn't. Lawyers, connections, the kind of money that makes legal problems go away for people like him and appear for people like me. I'd known there might be consequences, but I'd been so focused on the execution that I hadn't fully thought through what came after. "He can't prove defamation if everything I showed was true," I said. "True doesn't always matter in court. It matters who has the better lawyer." Tessa pocketed her phone. "Go home. Stay quiet. If anyone asks, you were a guest who wandered into the wrong area. I'll make sure Derek's story stays fuzzy." "Why would you do that?" Tessa glanced at Nina with something like pity. "Because I know what it's like to be used by Julian Cross, and because watching him melt down in front of Richard Harrington was the most satisfying thing I've seen in years." She smiled thinly. "Consider it a professional courtesy." I didn't fully trust Tessa. She had her own agenda, always had, but her advice was sound. The longer I stayed, the more complicated things would get. "Nina," I said, turning back to her, "whatever happens next, I want you to remember something." She looked at me with exhausted eyes. "What?" "I loved you. For 2 years, I loved you. I trusted you. I built my life around the idea that we were partners." I paused, feeling the weight of those words. "And you threw it away for a man who literally ranked you on a spreadsheet. So before you spend too much time blaming me for tonight, ask yourself who really destroyed your life." I got in my car and drove away. The city lights blurred past my windows as I headed toward Marcus's apartment, my mind racing through everything that had happened. The presentation, Julian's meltdown, Nina's tears, Tessa's warning about lawyers and charges. Had I made a mistake? The question gnawed at me as I parked, climbed the stairs, let myself into Marcus's place. He wasn't home yet, still at the venue, presumably dealing with the aftermath. I poured myself a bourbon from his cabinet and sat in the dark, replaying the evening in my head. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Richard Harrington. We need to talk. I'll be at the Riverside Grand tomorrow at 10 a.m. Ask for me at the front desk." I stared at the message for a long moment. Richard Harrington, the investor Julian had been courting. The reason Nina had been so valuable as Julian's real estate ATM? Why would he want to talk to me? I typed back, "I'll be there." Then I finished my bourbon and waited for whatever came next. Around midnight, Marcus came home. He looked exhausted, but wired, the adrenaline of the evening still visible in his eyes. "Hell of a night," he said, dropping onto the couch beside me. "And Julian's done. I mean, completely done." Harrington confronted him in front of everyone, demanded to know if the partnership with Nina was real. Julian tried to spin it, but the spreadsheet was still on the screen. Hard to lie your way out of a document that literally ranks women by asset value. "What about Nina?" "She left before I did. Looked like she'd been crying for an hour." Marcus glanced at me. "You talked to her?" "Briefly. She tried to blame me for destroying her life. Classic, no accountability. She also told me Harrington pulled his investment. Did more than that. I heard him tell Julian's business partner that he was going to warn every investor he knew to stay away from Julian Cross." Marcus whistled low. That's not just losing one deal. That's getting blacklisted from the entire industry." I thought about that. Julian's new venue was dead. His reputation was dead. His network of investors and connections, the whole infrastructure he'd built on manipulation and lies, was crumbling. And tomorrow, Richard Harrington wanted to talk to me. Something was coming. I just didn't know what yet. Sunday morning arrived cold and bright. I dressed carefully, professional but understated, and drove to the Riverside Grand, my own workplace, to meet a man whose investment I had just helped destroy. The irony wasn't lost on me. Richard Harrington was waiting in the lobby lounge, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of quiet confidence that comes from decades of success. He stood when I approached, extended his hand. "Adam Mercer, thank you for coming." His handshake was firm, his expression unreadable. I sat across from him, waiting for whatever accusation or threat was coming. "I'll be direct," Harrington said. "Last night was chaos. Julian Cross's launch party became a public execution, and you were the executioner." He paused. "I'm not here to condemn you for it." "Then why are you here?" "Because I've spent 40 years in real estate, and I've learned to recognize two types of people, those who build things and those who exploit the builders." He leaned forward. "Julian Cross was the second type. He used Nina Ashford's reputation to get access to me. He lied about their partnership, their relationship, everything. Your presentation made that clear. I wasn't trying to help you. I was trying to expose him." "I know, but the result was the same. You saved me from investing $500,000 with a fraud." Harrington smiled slightly. "I wanted to thank you in person." I hadn't expected gratitude. I'd expected lawyers, threats, complications. This felt surreal. "There's something else," Harrington continued. "Nina Ashford. I've worked with her before, legitimate deals, good work. She's talented, even if her personal judgment is questionable." He studied my face. "You still care about her." "I cared about who I thought she was." "Fair enough. But for what it's worth, I don't think she was part of Julian's scheme. I think she was another victim who couldn't see the cage she was in until you opened the door." I thought about Nina's face last night. The shock when she saw the spreadsheet. The devastation when she realized she'd been ranked and categorized like inventory. "What happens to Julian now?" I asked. "His venue deal is dead. His reputation in the industry is destroyed. Last I heard, 3 other investors he'd been courting have pulled out of preliminary discussions." Harrington shrugged. "He'll try to rebuild somewhere else, probably under a different name. Men like him always do. But he won't do it in my city." Harrington stood, buttoned his jacket. "You work here, don't you? Night audit?" "Yes." "Interesting choice for a man with your observational skills." He handed me a business card. "If you ever want to apply those skills somewhere more lucrative, call me. I'm always looking for people who can see through the masks others wear." He left me sitting in my own hotel lobby, holding a business card from one of the most powerful men in the city. I sat there for a long time, processing. The evidence I'd gathered, the plan I'd executed, the chaos I'd caused. It had all led here, to an outcome I hadn't anticipated, couldn't have predicted. Julian was destroyed. His business, his reputation, his network of exploitation, all of it crumbling. Nina was exposed, not as a criminal, but as a fool who had traded real love for manufactured excitement. Her reputation would recover eventually, but she'd carry this lesson for years. And me? I'd proven something to myself, that I wasn't the pushover everyone assumed, that the quiet night auditor who counted receipts and handed out room keys could see things others missed, could act when action was required. My phone buzzed, a text from Nina. "I'm sorry. For everything. I know it doesn't matter now, but I needed you to know." I read the message twice. Then I deleted it without responding. Some doors, once closed, should stay closed. I walked out of the Riverside Grand into the cold Sunday morning. The city was waking up around me, joggers on the riverfront, couples getting coffee, the ordinary rhythms of ordinary lives. My life didn't feel ordinary anymore. Something had shifted. The man who had sat at his parents' dinner table a week ago, watching his girlfriend announce she was still shopping for something better, that man was gone. In his place was someone who understood that sweetness without boundaries was just weakness with better marketing. I pulled out Harrington's business card, looked at it one more time, then I walked toward the river, toward whatever came next. Behind me, the Riverside Grand stood tall against the morning sky. Julian Cross's empire was in ashes. Nina Ashford was picking up the pieces of a life she'd shattered herself, and the night auditor they'd both underestimated was finally stepping into daylight. The water sparkled in the morning sun. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang. I thought about my mother's face when Nina said those words at dinner, the way her expression fell, the way my father stared at his plate. They'd been right to worry. They'd seen something I'd been too close to see. But now I saw it too, and I'd never be that blind again. I kept walking,